All right, we are live. Hello, everybody, and hello, Janicza. I'm going to do a little preamble here, and then we'll just jump into the conversation. Sound good? Oh, now we're recording.
Now we're recording, though.
Okay. Anyway, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to sort of the third and final in our sort of Hornitos Blacklist Happy Hours as part of the Blacklist and Hornitos Take Your Shot film program, a first of its kind partnership between Hornitos and the Blacklist, and a continuation of Hornitos' Shot Fund, a multi-year investment platform dedicated to empowering creative entrepreneurs taking shots at trailblazing ventures in their careers. And what does that mean practically for the Blacklist? It means that we're going to give 5 emerging filmmakers from underrepresented communities $15,000 to make short films based on their extraordinary feature screenplays in the hopes that it will help them take their shot at the next stage in their careers. See what we did there? The opt-in for that deadline is August 31st. If you want to know more what that means, hit the Blacklist website, blcklst.com, or just Google Hornitos and the Blacklist. It will get you there. Special thanks to our sponsor, Hornitos, for making all of this possible. And more special thanks to our special guest, Janicza Bravo, director of Lemon, which premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2017, and more recently, director of Zola, which premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival, which I also realized was the last movie I saw in a theater before the pandemic, which I'm not saying it's your fault, but you can say, really, given the way the world has worked recently. And you were hard at work right now on Kindred, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right. I am in prep on Kindred, and I think actually there's a friend in the group of people watching, Joy, who was a writer on Kindred, is a writer on Kindred.
Can you tell everybody what that is? Because before we jump into the real reason we're here, I just feel like we need to just start hyping this now, because there's a ton of reasons to be excited about it, but like just tell everybody what we're talking about here.
In brief, it's this novel written by Octavia Butler that I think it's almost probably been 50 years since it came out, I think. It has been adapted before. There was a film, maybe even a something in the TV space, I'm not sure, but definitely a film. It is the story of a Black woman who is in an interracial couple. The novel and the television show are a little bit different, and I don't want to give too much about the TV show.
Fair enough. You don't, yes.
In the novel, a woman who is in an interracial relationship finds herself in present day being transported to a 19th century plantation. It's sci-fi, it's dark, it's a little bit funny, it's absurd, it's surreal. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it.
It's funny because literally all of the words you use to describe that are like words that I would use to describe your work, maybe except for sci-fi. Like Zola doesn't really feel sci-fi, neither does Lemon, but like.
Oh, and I obviously can't forget that the reason I'm a part of it is Brandon Jacobs Jenkins. He's the showrunner, he's the creator, and he invited me to direct his pilot, and it's my first time doing the pilot.
It's like MacArthur award-winning, Pulitzer award-winning.
I mean, Pulitzer, MacArthur Genius.
Literally, like every single award a person can win, he's won like by the age of 35. It's really very offensive.
If you don't know his work, do a Google. You'll be very upset about where you are in your life potentially. I know I am.
Hard, same. Though I could also say that about you. So, it is what it is for me. But yes, very, very exciting. Brandon Jacobs Jenkins, Janicza Bravo, Octavia Butler. We will all be able to consume that at some point in the not too distant future. Lots of reasons to be excited. But not the reason we're here today. We're here to talk about short films. And you made a lot of shorts before making features, the first of which, if the internet is to believe, was called Eat. And that's what we're going to talk about today, sort of the process of making one's first short. So to do that, I want to go back prior to making your first short. And can you sort of give everybody the like quick and dirty, here's what I was doing artistically? Because let's see, you went to NYU, if I'm not mistaken?
I did.
Am I making that up? All right.
No, I did.
Did you go as a filmmaker though? Because I'm pretty sure you did not, as I recall.
No, I went as a theater student. I was in the theater school, and the studio I was in is called Playwrights Horizons. And the focus of that studio is directing, design, and also acting. You're a part of the education is you have to study all three, even though why I wanted to go to NYU was to be an actor, but they didn't think I was just that, apparently.
Well, I mean, feels like they were right.
Which is totally fine. By the way, totally fine. I mean, I thought it was an early blow to my ego.
I
As
mean, early blows to the ego are a good thing, though. Looking back on my own career, it doesn't feel like it at the time, but my experience would suggest that the earlier the better in some ways.
Oh, absolutely. I think actually, I made 7 shorts or 8 shorts before I made my first feature. And some of that was that the road to getting to the feature wasn't shorter. And it made me feel bad and like a failure, or like, it wasn't meant to be my space. And in truth, I feel so grateful to it because it was so instrumental to my own education in filmmaking. And also a lot of that rejection is more useful than the validation.
You thought I'm going to be an actor. You then studied design, theater direction, and acting. And then you moved out to LA shortly after the NYU experience. Like, what were you doing immediately prior to saying, okay, I'm going to direct a short film?
So I stayed in New York. I moved to New York when I was a teenager, and I lived there until I was 28. And after college, I was a waiter. I worked in retail, and my creative job was styling. And I did that as an assistant, and I also did it independently. I worked independently in music video and a little bit of commercial. And then as an assistant, I worked in fashion, and I worked for a handful of publications pretty consistently, or pretty regularly rather. It was Teen Vogue and Paper, and this now defunct magazine called Domino were the three that I worked for mostly. And then a little bit of Vanity Fair, a little bit of W, but very, very little. And then I did that until I was 28, and I moved to LA in the beginning of 2008, I think it was. And I continued to do styling here, music video, commercial, mostly commercial. I did one film, and then I don't, when is it? I think it's like in 2014 is when I made my first short. I was directing a play. The other thing was I worked in theater. I wanted to be directing theater and was producing theater independently. And I had directed what is now my last play, which was, I think, again, 2014. And the cinematographer saw my play, a cinematographer I used to work with at Funny or Die. So one of my jobs, my kind of like coolest job in LA as a stylist was that I was the in-house celebrity stylist for Funny or Die. And which it's fancy only because I got to be around like people that I really admire.
Right. But like, what does that mean? You're sort of when
no one cared about the clothes. The clothes, it was for Funny or Die, like 3, 4, 5 minute videos. No one gave a shit about the clothes, right?
Right.
But that was my job.
You did, but that was your job to make sure.
I cared, but I got to dress like, I got to work with Jim Carrey and Will Ferrell and Zach Galifianakis and Marion Cotillard and the list goes on of all of these, amazing performers, right, for 3 to 4 minute videos that, no one would remember that I was there. I was like, your pants.
I mean, I feel like in retrospect, they're like, wait a second, I remember her.
We'll see. I have not met them again, but I will make sure to remind them. But so I did that, and I made friends with the DP there who had worked on, he was sort of the in-house cinematographer, and we were pals, and I had been directing this play. It was August Strindberg's Miss Julie, and he came and saw it. And after the play, he asked if I had any interest in working in film or making films. And I, shyly said that I was. And he basically said, if you ever, he felt the play was very, in his words, very cinematic, the
Okay.
blocking and the styling of it. And he had said if I had any interest in making a film, he would want to shoot it and have the camera and have the crew and would do it for free.
Wait, who is this? Can we like shout out the cinematographer? Because that's a hell of a call on his part in retrospect too.
His name's Christian Sprenger, and he shot the first season of Atlanta. I think he also shot the second season of Atlanta. And before Atlanta, he worked on Baskets, and he's done other work too. He can be found. He exists.
But so literally he was just like, I think you're dope. I want to shoot whatever you do if you do something. And then did you have something already like did you have like a short, you were like, okay, yeah, actually this is the thing I want to do?
Absolutely. So I had, right before the play, right before Christian says this, my partner at the time, who was an actor, Brett, who was in E, I think maybe 8 or 9 months leading up to this, or a year leading up to this, I had been complaining. I mean, I was complaining the whole time. There wasn't just a year of complaining. There were many years of complaining. I think it was the 15,000th time I'd been complaining about wanting to direct or wanting to make this segue into directing. And he kindly but sternly basically said that if I wanted to be directing in film or in television, that no one was going to hand that to me. And so if I wanted to do it, I had to basically create the opportunity for myself. Right. And because as a theater director, I mostly wanted to be directing the classics or avant-garde pieces. And they were, but existing pieces. Right. And I think I thought, well, that's what I could do in film. I'll just, give me the script and I'll make it. And he's like, well, how and who, and you don't even know.
Yeah. It's like, who's going to give you the script if you've never directed anything before?
Yeah. And also because if you know people in theater and you've worked in theater, it's hard to explain to someone that you're a good theater director if they haven't seen it, or that you're a competent theater director, because you can show photos, but that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. And you could show video and that makes less sense than the photos, Right. And so he just said, like, if I wanted to do it, I had to basically do it myself. And, right. And so I went on this residency of sorts, and forced myself to write a bunch of short films, and ended up writing about 10 over the course of the year. And then when Christian is saying, hey, you should make something, right? I had a few, and I asked him, when he said that, I asked, you're going to laugh at me, but I was like, how much does a short film cost? And
no. I think that's reasonably the first question, because so much of it is limited by like, okay, well, what can I do with the resources that I have, and what resources do I need to gather to even pull this off? So I actually don't think that's a ridiculous question at all. I mean, it's literally, Hornitos is giving people $15,000, but like that it can be both limiting and empowering depending on what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. I just think, there's if you want to be making films, and you kind of want to, find there's not a clear path or map, or the steps on how you get there are a little nebulous, right? And if you haven't gone to film school, I think that gap feels even larger. And it was incredibly intimidating. And I really just didn't know. I was like, how much does it cost? And he answered, well, it kind of costs what you want it to cost. And I was like, that's still not helpful.
Yeah, not helpful.
Yeah, he was just
what would this short film cost?
Yes, exactly. I mean, I think he said, it depended on how much you were willing to spend, and also what the material was, right? Yeah. And I, with that same night, kind of scanned all the pieces that I'd written, and Eat felt the most doable. Again, I didn't know how much it would cost, but I thought there are only 2 people and there is 1 location. So that seemed
manageable,
producible, seemed producible. So I sent it to him that night, and he wrote me that morning and was like, great, let's do it. In, 4 weeks, I got a 3-day weekend. Let's do it. And then Brett and I were like, we've never produced anything. I'd produced my own theater. So I had a little bit of a sense, and he'd produced comedy shows, and we invited someone in that we knew who had worked and films and just kind of asked him to help us. We were like, we could pay for it, but like help us, we don't know how.
Were there, well, I guess at first, like, can you tell us a little bit about the short? Like, I mean, people can Google it, but like, just give us the basic idea. Two actors, one location, but what's it about?
So it's called Eat, and it is well, I'll talk a little bit about where it came from. We'd had this neighbor, so Brett and I used to live together, and we lived in this neighborhood that's called Beverly Grove. And we had this neighbor who, when we first moved in, had liked me, and then over a period of like a year or 2 years had decided that something about me was troubled. And I don't know what I had, but I had rubbed him in some way. And then what had started as the pleasantry of hi, hellos, then turned him looking at me crossing the street, but like staring at me while he was crossing the street. And even once running away from me. And then I had found out from a neighbor that he had been, I'm laughing only because it's just it's horrible, but also ridiculous. He had been, what's the word? A group of people, I don't know what the word is. A group of people had beat him up. There's like a word for this. But a group of people had beat him up, and they were all young Black people. And so when he would look at me, he was seeing them. And that was great. And I loved it. And that felt really good. Anyways. And so, but he was kind of an unusual man, and something was off about him. And I just found myself fascinated, and even more, I found myself being more attracted to the fact that he was kind of repelled by me, So I'd find myself like wanting to get jacked. That's it. It's jacked.
Or you got jacked. Okay,
jumped.
Got it.
Jumped.
Yeah, you got
That's
jumped.
the word. Thank you, people, for participating. Jumped. What day? It's early in my mind. But so he'd been jumped, and I just found myself really like more attracted to him being repelled by me, right? And I would try to make him talk to me, which was probably horrible. It's a horrible thing, but this is a while ago, guys. I wouldn't do that now. And I think that, and then I learned more about what was off about him, and he had lived with his mother, and he'd had some issues of socialization. Anyways, so I kind of had written this person. I wrote him, our neighbor, and the idea was this person who hadn't really spent that much time outside of the home he had grown up in, who had then found himself really fascinated by his neighbor, who was this woman who he was attracted to, who then is locked out of her apartment and then finds herself inside of his, and then he doesn't want her to leave. That's basically the story.
Got it. And then in the sort of making of it, what was that experience like of making your first short film? I know it's a very broad question, but like, what were the things that stood out to you? I guess it's like 10 years on now, or maybe like less than 10 years on. They're like, what, like thinking back, like what sort of awes you about that experience, or sort of like trips you up about, oh my God, I can't believe I did that?
So it was shot in 2 days. And I think the original script was something like 20 pages, which is a bad idea. That's too many pages.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's and we ended up cutting in the moment, and I'm so grateful to that, in that now I know, now when I work on stuff, I'm like, something here is going to go, and it's either you're in control of what that is, or you let it happen in the moment, which can be really disheartening and discombobulating in a way that can be hard to recover from in the moment. Right. But I'm glad I had that.
Right.
I'm so grateful to it. I'm just so grateful to it, because I wanted to be working in film and TV, and I was intimidated. I didn't know if I could. And it became Eat was a rehearsal and an audition for me of whether or not I could handle it, right? Or whether or not I felt like it was a space that I could be in. And the elements were really in my favor in a lot of ways, because I was paying for it. And everyone that was there had said yes to me, so like there was a lot on my side, but I was still very much auditioning. And I think that the sort of the end result is, I made it with really no intention of showing it to anyone. I kind of made it as my own
Right.
I also used it to teach myself how to edit. It was very much like
An exercise for you and you alone. And then if it turns out well, people can see it, but this is just for me.
Yeah, I planned on it not going anywhere really. And so we shot it. Then I spent a few months editing it, and there was a pretty decent cut of it. And Brett and Christian actually were like, you should submit it to South by.
Yeah.
And I was like, why? That sounds, well, I don't need that. I don't need other people to tell me I'm not good at something. And it's the only festival we submitted it to, and it got in. And then that experience totally changed my life. 1,000% changed my life.
I'm curious though, like you were obviously like you had just directed Strindberg, like on the stage. The idea that like directing a short film would somehow be intimidating is a little like it doesn't surprise me, because I think that like I talked to a lot of filmmakers who've transitioned from other art forms, and it feels like a big transition. But like when I say it like that, like you just did Strindberg on the stage, how could a short film have possibly been intimidating? I'm just curious, again, looking back, like where do you think that intimidation came from? Was it just that you hadn't done it before, or was there something related to the idea of film that was somehow more intimidating than like putting the classics up?
I honestly, I think it was film people. It wasn't the medium necessarily. It was, yeah, of course, a part of me thought I could, which is why I had thought that I should be there, right? But it was every film person that I had interacted with up until that moment had basically told me that there wasn't a way in for me. And so, and when I worked in commercials as a stylist and would be in environments where I would say, I am a director, if someone asked. By the way, I wasn't like on day one as a stylist being like, just because I'm a director. Exactly. This was, I understood.
I'm a director. If you want some ideas on this, I can 100%. No. I've got some thoughts.
No, I was always there. I understood what my role was in that space. It was more when walls came down and you were talking to a producer or talking to, a production designer, and people asked what you did, and I would say that I was a director, people would scoff at me, or people would, kind of say, I think that it's also, I looked like me and was, standing next to a rack. And I think the idea was like, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And so I had just found there were my own anxieties of whether or not I could. And then this feeling of, you are more open and more generous. You also have a partner who is a filmmaker. You're a little bit rounder. And I think that the space it is not egalitarian, right? Nope. And even in this moment, as I sit with you, having come off my second feature, being on this show, getting to direct this pilot, I am still in interactions with people who are treating me like I'm not supposed to be there today at 40, and this is a film that I made when I was 30. And I'm assuming I will be at 50 and there'll be some fucking ding dong who I'll still have to be like, yeah, I'm supposed to be here. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, unfortunately, I do. My hope is that by the time we're both 50, we can just laugh at those people I'm already kind of laughing at them in their faces now.
I am laughing at them too.
But I feel like in 10 years, we will just have everybody laughing at them, and then they can just skulk off. But yes, unfortunately, in 10 years, you and I are both still going to be dealing with that.
Absolutely. And I think that ultimately, so one of the things I just kind of figured out was that it had so much to do with how I saw myself, and I mean, maybe that's so goofy, but it was on me to get myself there and to see the version of myself that I wanted to see, and just know that it was going to be incredibly arduous and painful and emotional, but that if that's what I wanted, that was the road. I'm going off topic and probably making everything sound sad, but
it's interesting. You think that sounds sad. For me, that's the most inspirational thing you could possibly say, because I think fundamentally, I think that the thing, and this has been a consistent refrain that I've heard in these conversations and just talking to filmmakers generally, is that making your first thing, the hump is less developing the skill set and just believing that you can figure out the skill set as you'll need to when you're doing the thing. Because most of the people that I know, especially the ones who are coming from backgrounds where they do where they have anxieties about whether they can, they've been putting the work in to develop the skill set. They've been reading or studying so that in the moment, they discover that they have all these skills and talents or these references that they can sort of fall back on, even if they didn't realize that they had. It's a bit like, jumping off a cliff and thinking you have a parachute in your backpack, and you put it in there, but you're still worried it's not there. If you're the kind of person who's anxious enough to check and make sure the parachute's in the backpack 20 times before you jump, it's probably going to be there. If you're the kind of person who's like, of course I can direct, of course I can jump off this cliff and the parachute will be there, those are the folks who end up jumping off the cliff, pull the ripcord and the parachute's not there, and they just keep falling. Yeah. But I think it's important to just, you were scared. You were the one that had to get over that hump. And once you did, you found that actually pretty good at it.
Thanks.
I mean, history has sort of borne that out, I think, as well. It's not like I'm just pulling that out of my ass.
No, I mean, but you're just this morning, actually, I was talking to a friend about one of the sort of ethos of filmmaking that drives me crazy, which I kind of associate with a certain brand of filmmaking, and mostly like a handful of straight white guys that I'm not going to cite. And I think you'll know what I mean, where like I've been on panels with these guys who are just like, if you want to make movies, like just go out there and make movies and like shoot at your friend's house and shoot at your mom's house and just like make movies and get cameras and just buy them and just rent them. And I'm like, what? That's just not that access point doesn't exist for everyone. And I think it's sort of goofy. I know that I can't confidently sit up here and go, just make it, I paid for it. I paid for my first short film. I saved the money. I paid for it. And for all of the short films, even when I got money, I was still putting money into them because there were certain things that I wanted. And I paid for some things in my film, it's like that just is a part of how the road has been for me. And I think that my version of things might be more realistic for some people, right? That there might be some people whose road might look more like mine.
And that is why Hornitos is giving 5 filmmakers $15,000 each. I gotta bring it back. So last question, and then we'll let you go. What is the one thing, sort of having made the short and sort of knowing everything that sort of happened since then, that if you could go back and sort of, time machine wise, tell yourself the night before you went off to make Eat, what would be the guidance that you give? And not one of these like, girl, you got this pieces of advice, like concrete.
No, that was my answer. Girl, you got this.
But concretely, like, what is the piece of like guidance? Like, shoot a master, right? Like the concrete thing that like you would want all people to know as they embark on shooting their first thing. What would that piece of advice be?
Well, there were two. Okay, I was going to say one thing. Well, I was going to say something totally different, but I'm going to say both of the things. The night before shooting to Janicza, I would be like, really just a little more coverage so that you can actually edit this together.
There we go.
Really think about how things cut together. That's what I would have said the night before. After I've shot it, after that 48 hours of shooting it, I would say that compare your road a lot less. Spend less time comparing your road or your picture to your neighbors. I feel I spent a lot of time, a lot of emotional energy comparing myself and where I was or where I was not to people who I knew or people that I didn't know, people who kind of felt like we were maybe, I don't know, in the same umbrella or my contemporaries, but I found myself, I exerted so much emotional energy comparing myself.
I think that is just good life advice, filmmaker wise or not. It is practice that I've been working on myself. So I agree completely. And it's a thank you, as always. I'm very excited for Kindred, and I'm very excited to rewatch Zola at some point, and hopefully not set off another pandemic like I did.
That's how it started.
Maybe honestly.
Sundance is probably where it started. It was Sundance.
I do have a theory that Sundance was the entire Sundance and award season was one of the early major super spreader vectors. Look,
That's
I actually came back from
factual.
Sundance and was as sick as I have ever been. I think I had COVID. I'll never know, but yeah.
Same. We were a part of it. We did
I
it.
think a lot of people I knew did. A lot of people I knew did. Anyway, all right. Thank you so much. Again, if you want to check out this Hornitos short film thing, blcklst.com. And also just, Google The Blacklist and Hornitos. You'll find it. Dennis, again, thank you for your time.
Thanks
See
for
you all
having
on the
me.
internet. Have a good one, y'all.